There we are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Godless Family webcast. I'm Amanda Hayes, and with me today is my co-host, Aubrey Adrianson.
Hi.
And today we are talking about fundamental Christianity. Our guests are Dan Bunt, who is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and Eric Anderson, who is an ex-Mormon. So before we get started, I just want to have our guests tell you a little bit more about themselves. Dan, did you want to go first?
Sure. Hi everybody. I'm Dan. I'm 30 years old, and I have been an ex-Jehovah's Witness since 2006. I was raised in that faith, but am an atheist now, and I just recently moved to the East Coast, so I'm getting adjusted to life here and work in the IT sector, and for the most part, I have a pretty good laid-back life. So that's kind of me right now in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you. Eric, how about you?
Well, I'm Eric. I live out in Salt Lake City. I'm 30 years old. I left the church in 2009, or more accurately, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm also an atheist. I've been that way since almost immediately after I left the church. And I go to Burning Man and I test software.
Excellent. Okay.
Not necessarily in that order.
Awesome. There are some people who think that don't really know the differences between the different denominations of Christianity, like Jehovah's Witness and being Mormon, but there actually are some pretty significant differences, it seems like. I did some research before we started the show. My mom grew up Mormon, and so she told me a little bit about it, but I didn't know the extent of it, and I don't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses except that they are very eager to give out that Watchtower book. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to start as far as... Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
As far as
as far as how your ex-religion is different from Christianity in general.
Okay. I suppose that the biggest difference between the two is most of Christianity kind of revolves around either a rapture or some far-off impending doom when God is going to say, enough is enough, I'm taking all my people to heaven, and the rest of them can, go to hell or do whatever they're supposed to do. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that is imminent. Like, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen any day. And they're, as everybody knows, they're an open proselytizing group. So you see them on Saturday every morning, and they call that the warning work. They go out and try to get let their neighbors know that really the end of the world is coming. So I would say that those are the two biggest differences. Is that they're such an aggressive, they're so aggressive with their proselytizing, and they are an impending doom organization.
So you said on Saturday mornings they go out telling.
Well, it's really every day of the week, but
okay, I was wondering.
They're much more aggressive on Saturdays and Sunday nights.
Oh, okay.
They know they're going to get people at home.
Okay, excellent. How about you, Eric? What do you think about Mormonism and how it's different from Christianity?
Well, I think the biggest difference that you'll find between Mormonism versus mainline Christianity is the belief in modern prophecy. So the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a man named Joseph Smith, and his claim was that he was visited by God the Father and Jesus Christ personally in the flesh, as it were, when he was a young man, and they instructed him not to join any of the religions that were exploding at the time of his childhood in the early 19th century. So the root of the Latter-day Saint faith is the belief in prophecy and the belief that just like in the time of Moses or Ezekiel or Daniel or even the first apostles like Peter, James, and John, that same sort of power to work miracles, that same sort of authority to speak in the name of God is alive and well today, and not only that, but is possessed by the leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm going to kind of jump between calling it Mormonism versus Latter-day Saint or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint. They're all the same thing. Mormon was actually a slur that was used by anti-Mormons back in the mid 19th century.
Oh wow! I had no idea. Okay.
Obviously, Mormons now don't really care as much, but it was definitely not a nice thing to be called, back in the 1850s.
Okay. Interesting.
But you guys, now that you're out, you no.
You cut out there.
Oh yeah. What was that?
Exmo.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So I was wondering, Eric, can you tell us anything about the Book of Mormon and why they pass out that book so freely, and what's different about it as opposed to the Bible?
Sure. So the Book of Mormon is an alleged record of an American people who were purported to be descendants of the House of Israel. Back in around 600 BC, a man named Lehi, also a prophet, took his family and all of his wealth, and being directed by God, he was actually shown how to build a ship that would cross probably the Pacific, according to the Mormon apologists, over to the United States, or not the United States, the Americas, thinking more Central America than U.S., despite the fact that the Book of Mormon itself, the golden plates that it was kept or stored on is the wrong word.
There's a lot there.
The Book of Mormon. Basically, it's a story. It's advertised as another testament of Jesus Christ. It's a record of a branch of the House of Israel that God told to go to the Americas. They had love and war and peace. Jesus, after he left the Jews, he actually went to the Americas, according to the Book of Mormon, and visited the people of the Americas and restored his church there as well.
So I want to interrupt just for a sec. So after Jesus was resurrected and left the Jews, he went to the Americas?
In the Book of Mormon, yes.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
Yeah, it's kind of sci-fi-tastic. But the story behind it is basically the Book of Mormon was the foundation on which the Mormon religion was built, as it were. It's what really converted most of the early members. It was supposedly translated by Joseph Smith himself, who was guided by an angel to where the record was deposited, buried. That's a better word for it. In a hill in Palmyra, New York, which is a long ways off from Central America. But the record itself was supposedly, and no one has ever seen it, but Joseph Smith and three other men, the so-called three witnesses that are at the front of the book, if you read it. The book itself was actually recorded on golden plates, engraved on golden plates, and Joseph Smith took those golden plates and went through them page by page and translated them. And the book we have now is the book that he supposedly translated. And that's why it's such a big deal to the Mormons.
Wasn't there something to do with a hat in there too?
Well, so you want to get into the more like esoteric knowledge, so to speak.
Sorry to sidetrack everybody here. I just
No.
part of the story.
So Joseph Smith was prior to his career as a speaker for the speaker for the gods, I guess. He was also a treasure hunter and a charlatan. And one of the things that he would do is he would go to farmers and offer to find treasure using like a dowsing rod and a few other tools. One of them was a peepstone, which he put up to his eye so he could see where treasure was buried in their farmland. And he used the same peepstone. He would put it in a hat, and he'd bury his face in the hat. And I don't have a hat that's quite 19th century enough to really do it justice, but he would literally wear it over his head and then translate that way while the person, his scribe, would be behind a curtain, a veil as it were, and taking down everything that he wrote.
Wow, that's really impressive.
I wish I had that skill.
I know. I think a lot of us would. So I have, hopefully you don't, I'm not trying to drill you, but I do have a couple other questions for you because, like I said, my mom grew up Mormon, and I want to know if the way that her family practiced their faith is similar to the way you did or the Latter-day Saints Church in general. Growing up, my mom said that the rules for I don't know how to explain it, but dress and what you ate and drank were a lot more strict than some of the other progressive religions, like just progressive Christianity. Can you tell us a little bit about that if you're familiar with it?
So, with regard to modesty, the church places a really
huge emphasis.
Thank you. That's the right. I was going to say onerous emphasis, but they make a really big deal over covering your body, especially if you're a woman, but also for men. The idea being basically that your body is a temple, therefore it ought not be seen. Following along with the body as a temple, Mormon members, faithful members, are not just discouraged; they are forbidden from drinking alcohol, coffee, tea. Some take that a step further and forbid themselves from imbibing any sort of caffeine. Nicotine, completely out. Any sort of illegal drugs. In terms of the sort of life you're supposed to live, there is not anything that the church doesn't have a rule for. So when it comes to your diet, when it comes to your dress, when it comes to your manner of speech, swearing is sinful. Swearing can actually get you in trouble enough that you won't be allowed to partake of the sacrament, for instance. That sort of thing.
Is that still...
I'd be in so much trouble.
Yeah. Is that still current? Do practicing members of that religion still believe most of that, or
Yes.
has it evolved?
It actually, the word of wisdom, or the dietary restrictions, was at one point in the church's history just considered a suggestion. Hey, if you live like this, you'll probably be happier and healthier. But because of the way that high control religions work, suggestions become rules, become laws, become like divine mandates. And so over the course of the century and a half of the church's history or so, it went from Brigham Young distilling his own liquor to it being a sin close to, say, like a salt to drink, or maybe less terrible to drink coffee or tea. But if you were to drink liquor or something, you were a bad person.
Okay. Aubrey, did you have any questions before I keep drilling this guy? I feel bad, but I'm very curious.
For the Jehovah's Witness, for Dan, I had heard somewhere that the Witnesses believe that only a certain number of people can get into heaven.
Yeah.
And it's a really low number.
So let me
Like 144,000 or something?
144,000. Now, and they for some reason they've decided to take that number literally, even though it comes from the Book of Revelation, which is entirely allegorical. But I'll get to that. I should preface this by saying that the Jehovah's Witnesses they started out as very much an adding up the numbers to try to make predictions sort of organization. The founder of the of the Jehovah's Witnesses before they were even called that. His name was Charles Russell, and he separated from the I can't even think of the name of it right now, but it was kind of like Baptists, but he believed in things like pyramidology, calculating the dimensions of pyramids to try to come up with and predict dates for when, Armageddon or the end of the world might happen, or the return of Christ. And he actually made several failed predictions and apologized them off and continued on to make another one all the way down until he died. But it came about that the organization was getting large enough that they needed to find a way to separate the decision makers from the rest of the people that is part of their lives. And so the leadership at that time just decided that in their interpretation of the book of Revelation, that it meant that only 144,000 worthy people from the entire course of history, from the death of Christ till now, only 144,000 of those people would actually be able to go to heaven. Now, in the normal Christian rite of the sacrament, only those people in the Jehovah's Witness religion are actually allowed to partake of that sacrament. The rest of us are considered other sheep, where it means that we're supposedly going to live forever on paradise earth, because God's. So it says somewhere in the book of Revelation, it says that God's going to turn the earth back into a paradise, and only the people He likes are going to live there. So they split it up so that one group, one very small select group that they all just happen to be a part of, we're going to be the ones to go to heaven when they die, and everybody else hope that they either made it to Armageddon and were able to live in God's new kingdom, or die and then God would resurrect them, because He's good at that kind of thing. That whole zombie thing is just so.
Okay. That's interesting, because I that was never explained to me quite that way. So I always thought it was only 144,000 that made it to heaven, and everyone else had to go to hell. So it's not as dire as it originally. Not that I'm worried, but.
I apologize if there's any Jehovah's Witnesses or recent former ex-Jehovah's Witnesses out there that are listening to me, because they've recently made a lot of organizational changes. I'm not even aware of all of them or what the implications of them are regarding this policy, but they've revised it probably at least 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years in terms of doctrinal matters. So I might not even have the correct interpretation of what that means for an active Jehovah's Witness right now.
Wow.
That's the way that it was.
What's the Watchtower all about?
It's a sales pitch. It really is. It's mostly. I mean, that's the easiest. It's a piece of. I don't want to call it propaganda, but there's really not much of another name for it. But it's designed to try to capture the reader's interest. It introduces them to the circular way that they argue about things, so that it makes it very difficult for them to refute anything that you're saying. And it is designed to pique your interest and just get you associated with the circular logic that they're going to use if they try to start a Bible study with you and teach you about their worldview. So that's 100% the purpose of it. Now, there's actually 2 watchtowers. There's a watchtower that everybody that is the one that they show everybody, and then there's one that goes to only members, and they sit and discuss that one as a group every Sunday. So there's a lot of things that they say that they don't want you to know about until you actually get indoctrinated to the point that you're regularly going there and taking information from them. So that's just something that probably not a lot of very many people know. So there's actually 2. There's the one that they're going to try to hook you with, and then there's the one that has all the stuff that might be a little weird for somebody who was just regular Christian or maybe a non-believer.
What I find interesting about Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses is they are aware. It seems like both of these groups are aware that other people think that they're crazy.
Cultish. Yeah.
And like, prime, would-be converts, like, okay, I'm just going to give you the part that's not so crazy. And then once I got you here, we're going to get a little crazy, and since you're already invested in the church, maybe I'll keep you. I find that they're not the only sect that does that, of course, but I think that's something that the two definitely have in common.
Yeah, when I had one come to my house, a Jehovah's Witness, excuse me, she had just started prefacing me with like questions in general before she even wanted to start talking about it. She asked me, now I'm paraphrasing, so I could be wrong, but I think I remember her asking me if I believe that God or Jesus was our Lord and Savior, and I think she expected, like most people, to be like, well, yeah, and then she would move on and keep talking, but I was like, no, I don't. And she's like, oh, then you need this literature, and I was like, no, I don't. I'm going to need you to go. 3 kids to take care of, 2 dogs that are barking, like, you got to go, I'm so sorry. But yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's like they try to get you with something seemingly innocuous.
Absolutely. The only people that I ever saw that were brought into the Jehovah's Witness organization were done so because they were given a Bible story book for their children that piqued their interest enough that the gesture piqued their interest enough that they eventually progressed to actually join up. And that's the only experience that I've ever personally had of somebody actually joining the religion. Most people are born into it, but yeah, it really is designed to be able to it's whatever little hook that they can give you that's going to kind of get you to come back for more, ask another question.
Yeah, I have children, and many of my friends also have children that are the same age or younger, and I've noticed some of my friends who were not secular or non-believers or non-affiliated all through childhood and young adulthood, and as soon as they had children, they felt, well, I better join a church. And I don't know if that's like a revelation they came to on their own or if someone kind of got them at the right time. But I find that fascinating, though.
I've experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't have children, but a lot of the friends that I have are married they're perfectly fine. And as soon as they have kids, all of a sudden they're going to christenings and all this other stuff. So it's an interesting phenomenon how it seems to change people that are either
Oh. Okay, there he is. Yeah, it's been I hate to say it, but it's been disappointing. But they say they're happy, and it is fascinating. Just the children come into the picture, and you think you need church, and I don't know. I don't think I need it. I think I just need more friends.
That might actually be a big part of it. Is the fact of the community. I do know.
Exactly. I was just going to say this.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that. Keep going.
A lot of religions use this community as a means of leveraging their membership to stay. And I mean that's something that both Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons encounter when they're leaving the church is just the mass loss of.
There's a lot of stuff comes in here.
Yeah, I have to think that that's it, because also when you have children, you do lose friends, and I don't think it's it's just kind of natural. You have less time, and so that's kind of a way to kind of perk up your social life a little bit, and then also have help with the kids, which is also really important and hard to get. So I guess I get that.
And a lot of people kind of equate, we've talked about it before, but they equate being religious or going to church with automatically getting morals. And I have a friend who is extremely secular from everything that we've talked about. I've made it very clear how I feel about religion and my beliefs, and she's been really respectful of it and kind of commiserates with me about uber religious people sometime. But then a couple of months ago, she told me that she had some neighbors that asked if they could take her 6-year-old to church, and she was like, "Yeah, go ahead, let him get his dose of spirituality. Like, good for him." Which just like really cracked me up. Like, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's weird." And even somebody who really seemed like she didn't lean that way, just thought that it was something that her child should have in his life. Just even on the back burner. I thought that was funny.
I know that a lot of people do feel guilty over not bothering with their religious heritage. Like, they might have grown up in a religion of some sort, and then as they grew up, they got bored with it, or they got busy, or whatever. And then when they find children, or when they have children, that would be kind of weird if someone found children, like, run into them in the forest or at the mall or something. They get their children, and they find that they're missing something. At least they think they're missing something, and they still believe something, and as a consequence, they have a reawakening, a renaissance of their former spirituality that they kind of left by the wayside as a younger person, and so I think a lot of the secularity that you might see is deceptive in that it's more of a secularity of apathy rather than a secularity of decision or purpose.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
That brings up something interesting to me, is that I think that's really when we're talking about the differences between, high control groups and Christian fundamentalists and your average Joe, probably went to church a few times as a kid person, is that from the moment we were born, that really became our identity, and we didn't really have a choice. It was the fundamental hub that ran our lives, and it's just not that way for a lot of people, and it still surprises me when I encounter that kind of that lackadaisical attitude towards religion and spirituality, because because I just never experienced that. So I obviously have a very strong opinion about it. So it's really highlights the difference to me between the way we grew up and the way that you're probably your average person that's our age grew up. So
that's actually a really good segue into the next question I was going to ask. What was it like growing up in that religion? Eric, I don't know if you want to start us out on that, about what it was like growing up.
So, as a child, being Mormon isn't terrible. On Sunday, the worst part about it is that you have to deal with a 3-hour church meeting, which I mean, when you're 5.
Which turns into 6 hours by the time you become 10.
Yeah, especially when you start getting into leadership roles and that sort of thing, and they start heaping more meetings onto you. And oh, by the way, you need to go receive fast offering, which is a euphemism for collect, but that way no one feels obligated. Growing up Mormon was, on the one hand, I was surrounded by very good people. And the way that my mother taught me. My father was not a member of the church until I was 13 or 14 or so. I don't remember exactly when he was baptized.
I didn't even know it was that late.
I remember like crying in 12, like as a deacon. So I was either 12 or 13 at the time, because he was not a member and he was uninterested. And like, in hindsight, I don't blame him for it. But
if you know his dad, that's hilarious.
and so, you're surrounded by really good people, and it's a warm, loving environment, and that sort of thing. So as a child, it's okay. It's not bad. But then the pressure starts to build around the time you hit 8, which in Mormon land is the age of accountability, which
Wow.
Big, right. I can't even drive a car, but you're going to be held like morally accountable for all of your actions.
My daughter won't sleep with her window open, and she's 8. I can't imagine making her accountable for everything that she does.
That weighed
Go
heavily.
ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's absurd. I didn't really feel like I was a grown up until I was like 28. So that's a 20-year difference. and when a young Mormon turns 8, they are expected to be baptized. And what baptism does is it's basically it is a sacrament. It is you declaring your affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, your affiliation with Jesus, with God, with the restored gospel of the universe. And so it's a big deal. And what it gets kind of wrapped up in that is the age of accountability, baptism being a way of wiping away your old sins, that sort of thing. Beyond that, though, you're expected to have a testimony by that point. You're supposed to know that the church is the truth with a capital T, and that weighs heavily on a young mind that's actually curious and wants to do right and has only really seen this one possible avenue of finding that truth. And so, I burned a lot of energy and time trying to find my testimony, and I finally found an excuse. I had a dream that had Jesus in it, and so therefore I became a Mormon.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I was desperate to find something, because if I didn't, then there was something wrong with me. I didn't think at the time. I didn't have the critical faculty to think maybe there's something wrong with the message. But even if I did think that, there was no way out. There was no way out because my family was Mormon. My friends were Mormon. My entire world was Mormon. But, as an 8-year-old, it's not a big deal. But as you're growing up and become a teenager, you start to be around more people, you start to see the rest of the world, you start to grow up and experience puberty and that sort of thing. The rules become more and more progressively difficult to keep up with, especially since the expectation is that you'll take on leadership roles, and that means extra meetings, and you're already using up 8 hours of your week on just going to church for those 3 hours, and then you've got let's see, I'm gonna turn this off.
I was wondering if that was you or me.
No, that's me. I'm gonna snooze this. Anyway, sorry about that. And so you have more and more responsibility heaped onto you. You're not allowed to date until you're 16 as a Mormon. You're not allowed to go to dances until you're 14. When you do date at 16, you're not allowed to really single up or pair off until you've come back from your mission, which they recently changed the rule. You're now allowed to go on a mission at 18 instead of 19. Likewise with women who were expected to wait until they were 21 if they were going to go on a mission, which was basically a stopgap. Well, I haven't been married yet, so I'm going to go on a mission and see if God loves me more then.
Oh no!
Wow.
So disturbing.
It's brutal.
Wow.
To grow up Mormon, because the expectation is that you are perfect, that any sin means that you are less worthy of the respect and care and company of your peers. If you are told by your bishop not to take your sacrament or to not participate in priesthood ordinances as a young man, people notice and they assume the worst.
And they gossip like crazy.
Scrutinizing everybody.
Social disease.
Yeah. I remember being told. I grew a goatee when I was 15 because I could. And
I think we're terrible, by the way. It looked terrible, but you're the only one of us who could do it.
It wasn't a great goatee, I admit. It looks better now, father, but... The day I shaved it off and I came into church, I had one of my priesthood leaders come up to me and tell me straight up, Eric, you look like a priesthood holder now.
Oh my goodness.
Because evidently having facial hair meant that I was a sinner.
Oh.
And it's that sort of an attitude about conformity, which is often considered obedience. There were good things about being raised Mormon. I learned how to speak publicly. I was raised in the Boy Scouts, and I'm not really all that worried about a lot of the things that Boy Scouts do. Camping is fun, easy, not a huge issue. When it comes to my relationship with myself, it took me a decade to get over the damage.
Wow. Okay, we have a question where we ask some of the consequences of you leaving, but I don't want to skip ahead too far. I want to talk to Dan about what it was like for him growing up as Jehovah's Witness.
We were talking about this earlier, and there are seriously marked differences in the way that a Jehovah's Witness grows up. The first thing you have to understand is that, I think there's probably two foundations to a JW youth. There are no holidays, and that's anybody who's gone to school with a Jehovah's Witness knows that. There's no Christmas, birthdays, Easter. There's no patriotism. They claim political neutrality, so there's no saying the Pledge of Allegiance. There's no 4th of July, Memorial Day. They all go out the window. We're supposed to look away and not engage in them at all. The other thing is absolute 100% conformity. It is an insular society. I didn't have a great childhood. My mother was very loving and caring. My dad worked hard, oftentimes 2 jobs. They did their best to support our family. We went to church 3 times a week, usually 2 hours. One of those hours was one of those days was usually only an hour. And when I was 10 years old, all my friends started getting baptized. And now the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't baptize the traditional Christian way, which is the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. You dedicate yourself to God's earthly organization. What that does is it locks you in to a lifetime of fealty to being a Jehovah's Witness. Now, when you're 10 years old, it's really difficult to understand the consequences of making that kind of lifelong commitment to an earthly organization. What happens is that if you break any of their rules, and their rules are not recorded or written. I mean, there's the basic Christian ones that you can think of. Don't have premarital sex. Don't sleep with somebody else's wife. Don't steal things. Don't be a drunkard. Don't masturbate. But there's a million unwritten ones. They can kick you out for viewing pornography. They can kick you out for if they catch you telling a lie, even if it's in your best interest. If you a big thing was during the Vietnam War when there was the draft. If you complain, if you called conscientious objector, you had to go to prison. You weren't allowed to accept other work for being able to do that. And so if you did decide to go through the draft and fight for your country, then you were immediately kicked out. Now, and they can do this at any time, and it's completely at the discretion of whatever the local leadership of any one particular congregation feels. Now, they have some oversight, but for the most part, they're running their own little kingdoms over there, and I don't need to tell you what happens when you give some old white guys a whole bunch of power over people's lives. It usually doesn't turn out well. I'm not saying that there weren't good guys that did this, but for the most part, there's a lot of self-serving, and so when I was 10 years old, I made this dedication, and then the best thing that ever happened to me happened, and that's we moved to Seattle, and because my mom was on a big kick, she decided to homeschool us and put us into a homeschool resource center, which is where I met Eric. And Eric was the first friend that I ever had that I was able to hang out with on a daily basis that wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. And at that point, it took no time at all before a cognitive dissonance started to happen, where I started questioning. I knew that I believed in being a Jehovah's Witness so much. I knew it had to be the truth. There was no other way. It was for me. And then I made a friend that I respected and that I could talk to, but he felt the exact same way about what he believed, and what he believed was crazy. I mean, talk about it. It was completely nuts, but he believed it every bit as much as I did, and that set me down a path that I'm still going down right now. That's why I'm here talking to you. But it was a very bleak childhood. Unfortunately, it's a very, like I said, it's very insular culture. There's a lot of spying. You're expected to report on anybody that you find committing. Even if you think they're committing wrongdoing, you're immediately supposed to go to the church leadership so that they can address it. They aggressively root out anybody who breaks their rules, and they will kick you out. And they are a shunning organization. So that means is that nobody who's still a part of that organization will have anything to do with you at all until you go through their very long, arduous process to be able to rejoin. So,
Wow.
that's what growing up a Jehovah's Witness was like. It was an interesting experience. It did give me good things. I can also public speak. I have no problems getting up in front of a group of people and being able to talk. I have really good study habits, and it gave me unique experiences. When I was a little kid, I had to go door-to-door preaching to the Amish. You want to talk about weird meaning weird. So, and I mean, how many people can ever say that? So, it did give me good things. I feel like it's obviously not responsible for my moral character, but I think that in some ways it gave me a good character as a person. Even if I don't believe in that at all anymore, it really laid the foundation for my humanism.
Wow. I love that story that you guys met when you were young, and you were a part of two completely different religions. Eric, what was it like for you when you were first starting to meet Dan and growing up as a Mormon? Was it similar to that?
My cognitive dissonance didn't set in until much later. I was delighted with Dan as a friend. We were best friends all through high school. At the time, I was actually if you were 14, then I was 14-ish.
You're only a few months older than I am. Stop it.
Hence the ish, right? I'm not entirely sure. That was a few years before probably my memories of that time of my life are really wrapped up in my discovering that being Mormon was terrible.
I can help you out. I think I can help you out here because there's a lot that happened in that time period because I remember it very well because of the crazy things that I was doing at that time. It got to a point where I was so dissatisfied with not being able to ask questions because another rule of being a Jehovah's Witness is that if you question authority at all, you're gone. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You cannot question the information that comes from the Watchtower Society. Now, so I didn't, but what I started to do was I started to secretly sneak off and go to church with Eric because he loved it. So why not check it out myself? And so, and that's that actually to this day is the original reason why they kicked me out. But I think that whole process, I actually followed it all the way through. I wanted to experience something different. I was fed up and I wanted to. I don't know if I necessarily wanted to fit in with my friends, but I just wanted to. I wanted to experience a different world outlook, but it never. When that happened, all of a sudden I had cognitive dissonance for two different religions. If this is false and this is true, this is false over here and this is true over here, and you flip-flop them in any particular case, and there's no right answer, then they must all be wrong. And it was about that time, it was probably about, I would say, 20, 21, 22, that Eric and I had some really emotional, intense conversations about what was true or not. I remember that we parking lot next to the Bellevue Temple, and we had a huge conversation at that time about what's real and what's fake, and what does this mean for our lives moving forward. And then he got accepted into BYU and was just like, education. And I'll let him finish that story there. But yeah, that there was a huge time there where I think that, at least I felt like we kind of just built each other's cognitive dissonance to a point where we eventually knew that we had to take action and move in a different direction with our lives if we were ever going to be happy with ourselves.
So I have a question for you guys, and I know this is moving into your next question, Amanda. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we had talked about in a previous episode is, realizing that you no longer believe and kind of proclaiming your atheism. And a lot of atheists have said that they feel relieved, that it was like a burden off their shoulders because, they weren't worried about heaven or hell anymore, they weren't worried about sin anymore. And for me, because I grew up more or less secular, but I was still expected to be a Christian. My parents were like non-affiliated, basically. I was actually a little devastated. And devastated might be a strong word, but it's that realization that you are different, that your beliefs are not in line with anyone else that you know. And you had each other, but I had no one. And so I was really kind of, I felt, I don't know if I want to use the word abandoned, but I definitely felt all alone and isolated in the world when I first realized that, yes, I was definitely an atheist. And I just want to know if you had any of those similar feelings, especially considering in both your situations you had to leave your community.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I can empathize with exactly what you're talking about, right down to a T. For a long time there, besides Eric, in our ongoing distance friendship, I was the only person in my life that felt this way, and I was really all I had. So, 100%. I absolutely do know what you're talking about.
The decade that led up to my leaving the church, I don't remember a lot. Turns out that the way that depression works, it interferes with your ability to form new memories. I have a few things that in my mind stand out as things that actually happened, I hope. Overall, it's a long black period in my life that I can barely remember. I do remember the first time that I considered the possibility that there might not be a God, and I remember it feeling like ice water. Like I just plunged my head into a bucket of ice water. Like it was terrifying.
Yeah.
Because and this was long before I eventually made the decision to leave. But I think fortunately for me, I was actually fairly isolated over that period of time. I became less and less involved socially with the church because I didn't really have that much in the way of friendships there or people who I could trust. And so I didn't lose that sort of community, but
BYU's a weird place, right?
What's that?
The BYU is a pretty weird place.
It's like Camelot in that you ought not go there. It's a silly place.
I love that. Oh, that's awesome.
But beyond that, and I don't want to ruin your question because it's an important one. But when I made the decision that I could no longer believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as the truth, I've never felt more betrayed. I had burned my entire life to a crisp for the sake of a lie. And I still, every year on the day that I left the church, I pull open my journal, I read those 2 days of entries, and I remind myself where I came from. It's not a small thing. I know, like when I made that transition to atheism, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm an atheist. But when I left the church, it was my world ending.
Wow.
That's really powerful. I've never heard anyone say that they've been betrayed before. I've never heard those words, but I do believe I know people who have had those feelings.
It really is an incredible feeling to just, wake up and realize that you've your life on an entirely fruitless pursuit that's, harmed you significantly one day, and all the question, it's overwhelming, the number of questions that come along with that.
It's like being Paul on the road to Damascus, only when the scales fell from your eyes, you saw nothing.
So after you guys kind of realized you were atheists or separated yourself from the church, I know, Eric, you said you didn't lose very much community, but how did you put the pieces back together? How did you build yourself back up and reintroduce yourself into a new community that was more supportive of your new beliefs? Either of you can go first.
Dan, you want to cover this first?
A lot of ways, I don't think I did. I got really good at being self-reliant. I no longer had a safety net. I mean, I made friends, but it was really hard. I just got used to dealing without the community aspect. I have a very small group of very close friends. I'm socially active, and I have friends outside of that, but it really made me realize just how responsible I am for my own happiness, well-being, upkeep, care, and stability. And I couldn't function as an adult for a long time until I figured out how to do it on my own. So I don't think I ever really rebuilt that. I just tried to supplement it with positive things that I could give myself.
Okay, so you didn't rebuild your old life. You maybe built a new life?
Yeah, that's exactly the best way to put it, I think.
Were you like, when you were making new friends, was it really organic, or were you seeking out people who were agnostic or atheist, would you say?
First, I didn't seek out any one particular worldview. I think as a personality trait, I've always been very accepting and open to other beliefs and other viewpoints, and enjoy the experience of how other people look at the world, as long as they're not trying to blow me up or convert me. So I don't know, does that answer the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I just asked because I know it's, for a lot of people, it is really a difficult transition. And when you lose that sense of community, I know one of the first things that Steve did, my husband, was create the Facebook group that you guys are both a part of, because he really needed to connect with people who believed what he believed or thought like him, so he could feel like connected.
I definitely did that online. I did join an ex-Jehovah's Witness forum, found a lot of people that were like-minded online and was able to talk about my issues. And I think that really the very best thing that I could have done was I went and saw a therapist for 6 months and got some professional guidance and realized, that I'm not the worthless piece of crap that the Jehovah's Witnesses say I am, because I'm not following their very strict worldview, and that I do have the right and authority to believe whatever I want to believe and to live the life that I want to live. So I as far as like the present world, was it was very, very difficult, very slow going to try to kind of rebuild that community in life. In a lot of ways, I never did, but I definitely have, to this day, a vast online community of people that I can bounce ideas off of. I recently had an episode with my family who I hadn't talked to in years, and those people were there for me and when I wanted to talk about it. So, no, the online resource definitely helped.
Awesome. What about you, Eric? Did you have any trouble, or were you quick to, I guess, compensate for the losses? How did you transition?
So there are two parts. Okay. In terms of my leaving the church, it was a long, drawn-out story. 2 years prior to me making the decision that I no longer believed, I was actually suspended from BYU. And my experience there was it was evidently I'm speechless. It was rough. That was when I stopped going to church because I just couldn't handle it. Like over the years after leaving the church, I realized that I started having flashbacks. Just at the idea of having to go back to church, and I started getting those flashbacks before I left the church. It was too stressful. It was too much. The things that I was doing to myself.
You felt so guilty for so long.
Cripplingly so. And so the interesting thing there, though, is that throughout all of that, even though I wasn't going to church, I was still doing my best to pray and read my scriptures and believe. I believed until I met a gentleman who actually hosts an ex-Mormon website called The Mormon Curtain, MormonCurtain.com. I worked with him for about almost a year or so, and during this time, I started reading the website and realizing that my experiences weren't unique. They weren't just me. They weren't my fault. It was something that was systemic. It was overall, and so the process of stripping away my faith to the point, and I use the word faith kind of reluctantly in this case. My belief is probably a better word for it, but the process of stripping that away to the point where I could actually pick out that one fallacy that made the entire thing crumble. I'm kind of circuitously surrounding your question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
When I left the church, I had 3 friends that I knew in the state. I had been kind of held up in my education because I'd been suspended a year and a half earlier. And so to begin with, I decided that I would lie to get back into BYU to finish my degree. And so I started going back to church despite thinking that the whole thing was a lie. I could not actually make it through an entire 3 hours of church. I would stop after the first hour, disappear, no one knew where I went. I'd go get some coffee because I needed something to just kind of soothe my nerves. It was a brutal 3 months while I lived down in Provo. And Provo, if you don't know, is 95% Mormon, which is where BYU, or Brigham Young University, is. And I guess for my own personal defense, I should say that I was suspended from BYU not because of any academic or misconduct. It was because I was sleeping with my girlfriend.
Oh my! Wow.
And that's fornication in Mormon theology is a sin next to murder. So I was almost as bad as someone who takes a rock and hits someone over the head until they fall over dead. And I mean, I was just enjoying the fact that I had fell in love with a woman. But at any rate, I lost everything in terms of my friends, my connection with my community, that sort of thing. 3 months later, I moved to Salt Lake City. Turns out that Salt Lake City, despite being in the center of Utah and run by a bunch of old cranky men who think that the future is a terrible place and that ought not to be a thing, Salt Lake City is one of the more liberal cities in the United States. And I fell in with. I actually started dating a girl briefly who introduced me to her friends, who turned out to be the best people in the universe. They were skeptical and secular and intelligent and conversant, and I started to meet each and every one of them and learn from them because they knew things that I didn't. They were better at life than I was. I'd been hiding from life. I'd been hidden from the world by my religion, by my family, by myself for so long, and as a consequence, I found I really hate the word tribe, but I'm going to use it. I found my tribe. These are my people, and I use that with an M and a P that's been capitalized. I
Fell in love with community.
Yeah, I found a community. I've experienced a second adolescence. I don't know. I would say that leaving the church was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was hard at the time. The things that led up to it were the worst things that ever happened to me. And I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I like your analogy about having a second adolescence because a friend of mine, she has somebody in her life who recently came to her life who is an adult, who's even much older than you, who was a Mormon for his entire life, and he recently left the church, and he said it like just almost exactly what you said. He felt like a teenager again. He was able to drink coffee and he was able to drink alcohol without being overcome with guilt, and he said that he just feels like he started his teen years over again. So it's funny that you mentioned almost the exact same thing.
It's a wonderful feeling. I mean, you can't see my bar from here, but it's literally right here. And it's ambitious, and I don't feel bad about it. I like being a grown-up, and that was one of the things that I figured out very early on after leaving the church, was that a lot of the things that they don't let you do as a Mormon are things that make you feel like you're a grown-up in just small little ways. Like I felt more grown-up for drinking coffee versus soda. I felt more grown-up for figuring out how to enjoy whiskey, for all sorts of different little things. I remember...
And doing those things responsibly, one of the things about fundamentalist groups in general is that they kind of have this belief that you can't do these things responsibly. That one drink and then the devil's got you. And no. Anytime you do anything, you have to do it. You have to be responsible, and you have this freedom to drink, but you also have this responsibility to drink responsibly, and I think that's also a part of what makes you grown up, is realizing that that you have to do these things in a certain way to be responsible. I keep using the word responsible, but I can't come to a different word. To do these things responsibly, and that's what makes you a grown up, and that's one of the things for me. I was really proud of becoming older was, in my late teens, early 20s, I'm drinking, having a good time, having lots of hangovers. I've got some pretty crazy stories that are totally inappropriate for this webcast.
Well,
and then, about 25, 24, 25, I'm like, this is not what I want my life to be. And trying to figure out, okay, yeah, I could have a few drinks. Sometimes I could even get drunk, but that crazy girl guzzling a half bottle of tequila, that's
a Thursday?
That can't be my life. And it's just, I feel like fundamentalist group don't see the difference between having a drink and guzzling a bottle. To them, it's the same thing, and it's not.
Well, there is no personal responsibility.
Right. Yeah, you don't have personal responsibility. Yeah. in a lot of ways.
If something good happens to you, it's your God's fault. If something bad happens to you, it's because the devil did something to you or because you are too sinful.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't claim any responsibility for your life, really, aside from your sins, which, I mean, we all know how effective negative thinking is in terms of making driving success. I remember feeling like it took me a few months to realize that, where I'm like, I can claim responsibility for my successes and my failures. This is fantastic.
I don't have to give the credit to anybody but me.
I remember early on, a friend of mine came out to me, and he had been a friend of mine for a good long while. He came out to me, and I was so happy that I wasn't Mormon because I didn't have to do the whole like dancing around the implied disapproval of homosexuality. I got to say, cool, I don't care, you're awesome, carry on kicking ass. Which maybe I shouldn't have said that on the air, but I really enjoy the freedom to be
awesome.
my own self, to be free to decide what is right and wrong, and then live by that. I mean, it sounds kind of Nietzschean, but turns out that it's also a good way to
healthy.
live with yourself. Yeah. Because God never had to live with my choices, assuming that he's a real thing. I did. My bishops never did. I did. My stake president never did. I did. And that's the one thing that I don't, that getting away from that has really, really made me a better, wholer person.
Awesome. We are over time, and I'm so sorry that I kept you guys, but I really thought that this was an important conversation to finish. So hopefully you aren't late for anything. But before we go, Aubrey, did you have any more questions for them before I ask them?
No, I just want to say thank you for your stories. They're amazing. So I'm hoping that a lot of people who felt what you felt, or maybe even going through what you went through, are watching, because it's so good to find out that you're not alone. That you can recover from religion. There is the Recovering from Religion Foundation. I should put a link to that below, on the website, and any other links that you guys want to recommend. Like you both said, you were part of a ex-Mormon and ex-Jehovah's Witness group. If you have links that you want to share, I can put on the website. I think that would be great, and just letting people realize that everyone, not everyone, but many people leaving their religion, their fundamentalist religion, are having those feelings. And thank you for sharing those feelings.
Absolutely, those are really powerful stories.
Thank you.
Thanks,
yeah, did you guys?
I just wanted to say one more thing in conclusion. That there are, in the atheist community in general, I have met so many ex-Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Moonies, Quiverful kids, and every other Pentecostals, every other kind of fundamentalist denomination that you can think of under the sun. And I just hope that maybe Eric and I can help them out a little bit. So thanks for having us on.
Of course, yeah. Did you have anything else you want to add, Eric? Any comments to wrap it up?
I think that Dan wraps it up perfectly.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Steve had one question and a couple of comments, but I think we're a little past our time, so hopefully he'll still love me if we skip those over, and I can maybe ask you guys after the show.
Okay.
But yeah, again, thank you so much for being on. I hope we can have you on again in the future for other topics, because it was really great talking to you guys. I think next week, did you want to talk about our show next week, Aubrey?
Next week we are doing a show talking to your children about gender equality, and David Viviano, the Gamma Atheist, is going to be on. And I believe I also got my husband back on, because I wanted, we're talking about gender equality, and I felt that it was really important that we actually had equal representation
Right.
on the panel. So 2 women, 2 men, and both the men are feminists, and so I'm really excited to talk about this and to talk about, ways that we can talk about and promote gender equality with our children. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I have spoken about it, and I will continue to speak about it various places, not only on the Godless Family webcast. So that's next week.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we really have anything else. You guys should visit our website, godlessfamily.com, that has all kinds of resources and subscriptions that you can purchase for parents raising kids in a secular household. Follow us on Twitter at godlessfamily, or I guess you can tweet either of us personally if you have any questions. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.